Hi and welcome to Dexibit. My name is Angie Judge, and in this video we're going to take a look at how to use the full toolbox for the studio for customizing your visualizations. So here I've got my visualization here. I'm looking at reviews over time. I'm actually going to choose to expand this visualization just so we've got the whole screen to deal with. Now on the right-hand side here is the toolbox. And when I open the toolbox, I've got the studio element available to me on the right-hand side here. I've also got the library, of course, so I can see all the different visualizations. Now, if I was on the dashboard, let's go back there, I can click that pen and paper item and get to the same place. So here I've got my toolbox popped out and I've got my studio tab there. If I just click on the toolbox and I didn't have a visualization selected, or I didn't have any visualizations, it would tell me to select one. So let's go ahead and expand that visualization. And we're going to start with the styling tab. So on the attributes tab, just before we dive in there, you've got all of the different options that we looked at. You've got the attribute of what data point you're trying to plot in your graph. You've got your function of what you're trying to apply to that number. You've got the opportunity to write a filter. You can potentially choose multiple locations if you've got them, or which location you want. You can change which date field you're choosing and any date range that you're choosing there. And you can choose how that data is grouped, potentially double grouped, and any additional functions that you want to throw in. But we're going to start on the style tab instead. So the first thing that we've got here is we've got the option to change the visualization type. So here I'm looking at the number of reviews that I've got over time, and I've grouped them by month. And so I've chosen a column chart, which kind of makes sense, but let's change it instead to, let's see, like a line chart. Actually, a column chart was probably the best choice, right? The next thing that I can do is I can choose my axes labels. So if we think Y to the sky, X is horizontal, so Y is vertical. So we can say X is months. And then in my visualization, I've got the option to change up the design. So the first option that it's presenting me with is stacking. Now, I can't stack this because I've only grouped by one dimension. So let's go back over to my data tab, and I'm going to choose 2 dimensions. So my second dimension, I'll choose like the rating. Does that make sense? Maybe the channel. That would be quite nice. Okay, so now I've got the number of reviews by each month and then by the channel. So whether it came on Google or Facebook or whatever. And now if I go back to my style tab, now I've got the option to stack because I've got those 2 dimensions. So you can see the difference here is it's showing them side by side versus showing them all together. So I can see how the whole is comprised. And I might even want to go as far as show this as a percent, because I might want to see sort of the proportionate change over time. The other thing that I've got the option to do, let's unstack that, is to show some data labels. So this is showing me the actual numbers on my chart. Now, this is a really great way if you want some exact figures to be communicated, but you don't want to show them in a table because you do want that sort of visual element, but you want somebody to be able to read and actually pick up the real number. And I can choose, if let's say I chose that line chart, I can choose to throw those data points on there, which just adds some fancy dots. This is actually quite useful for this example, because if you have a look at August, there's actually a data point sitting in there. But because I'm looking at a line graph and it's a single isolated data point, it's not visually coming up until I hover over it. So showing data points on a line or spline graph is actually a really useful thing if you have this kind of thing going on where you might have sort of single standalone data points that aren't showing over time. The next thing I can do is choose to fix my y-axis, so y to the sky. That's how tall the graph is. You can see it's naturally sort of just defining itself a little bit over my largest value, but I might want to configure this because maybe I want, like I've got a goal to get in 50 reviews perhaps each month. So I sort of want to show my performance against that greater context very subtly. So that would be a good way to show that in. So next I can choose how I want to format the individual values. I've only got one measure that's showing on this chart, which is the count of the ratings, so the number of ratings. I might want to add a little prefix in there. Let's throw in actually an emoji and maybe a suffix. And we'll put it in reviews. And so we can see sort of how that would look like. Let's actually put a little space bar. That's a good hack. And then around that just to space it out. And so I can sort of define how this shows up for me in my tooltips and so forth. And if I had some data labels on, it could control that. The other thing is I might want to show sort of the precision of this number. So if I was looking at, say, revenue, I might want to choose to give it a decimal place. Doesn't make sense for this one. But this is a really handy thing, particularly if you're looking at averages, like average number of visitors per day, and you end up with a half a visitor or a fraction of a visitor. You might choose to wind that decimal placing down to 0, just so that it comes out in a way that makes sense. So lots of different options there. And lastly, that information box, if we go back to our dashboard, that is the text that's going to show to you on the back of a visualization. I'm going to click that pen and paper button to open that studio up in this view. So I've got the option there on my style tab to control what information goes on there if I wanted to change that around. So those are all of the different styling options that are available to you when you are editing or even creating your own visualization in Dexibit. Have fun styling it up, and I'll see you back for the next video.